Carol, come in.
Hi.
How's that letter to Mr. Chambers coming along? Have you answered all of his questions about premarital agreements?
I think I have it covered. I'd just like to go over a few things with you before I finalize the draft. Now, I've started the letter by explaining how the law in our state treats premarital contracts. Now, he's in commercial real estate, so he understands how contracts work. There must be an offer, an acceptance of the offer. There must be consideration. Both parties must have the capacity to enter into the contract, and the contract cannot be for anything illegal.
Good so far. Well, he's definitely a cross his T's, dot his I's kind of guy.
Yeah. Well, the next part of the letter, I've explained how premarital contracts differ from other kinds of contracts, specifically in the fairness requirement. Now, I've explained to him how the courts will take a very close look at any premarital contracts that are disputed, much closer than with other types of contracts. They'll look for evidence of unfairness in either the negotiating of the contract or in the terms of the contract.
Just so we're clear on this too, why are the courts so concerned about fairness in premarital contracts?
Well, one reason is that the couple is substituting their own terms for state law when it comes to rights of support and division of property in a divorce. In effect, each couple is making its own private law, which is very different from real estate contracts that must comport with state law.
Exactly. Are there any other differences between premarital contracts and ordinary contracts?
Well, one thing that I really want to stress to Mr. Chambers is that unlike in his real estate deals, where all parties are acting in their own self-interest, he and his fiancée Natalie are in a very intimate relationship. And although Natalie has a very well-paying job, Mr. Chambers is extremely wealthy and has a lot more to lose under state divorce laws. So the courts will take a very close look to make sure that there was no undue influence on the part of either party.
Correct. Be sure to point out, too, that premarital contracts are different than real estate contracts in terms of performance. When he buys a piece of property, the performance usually begins within a defined period of time that the contract is signed. But with any luck, performance of the terms of a premarital contract will never happen. Even if the couple divorces, it could be years after the contract is signed. During that time, a lot of things could happen that could make the original terms unfair.
You know, I don't know how to say this in the letter, but I don't think the courts are entirely comfortable with the idea of contracts and family issues. It seems kind of cold to apply legal standards to personal relationships.
I agree. I think the trend is definitely in favor of treating premarital contracts like any other contract, but the courts will take a close look to make sure that both parties are treated fairly.
Okay, now that brings me to my next topic in the letter. I know that you've asked Mr. Chambers for a complete schedule of his income and assets, and I assume his fiance's attorney will ask her for the same. I want to stress to him that he must make a complete disclosure, because the courts will take a very close look at that if the contract is ever disputed.
Good point. I'm so glad Mr. Chambers' fiancée has her own attorney. That relieves any anxiety about whether or not the terms are fair. Have I gone over the second glance doctrine with you?
Sort of, but would you go over it again?
What that means is that even if the terms of a premarital contract were fair at the time the contract was signed, the courts may want to take a second glance at the time of the divorce just to ensure the terms are still fair. For instance, Mr. Chambers and his fiancée don't want children, so there's an alimony waiver in their contract. But if the couple changes their mind, have children, and Natalie ends her career to care for the children, then the courts might take a second glance to make sure the terms are still fair if the couple divorces.
That makes sense. Well, this is going to be a very long letter, but we can use it as a sample for future clients who come to us with questions about premarital contracts. I'll have the draft for you by tomorrow.
Thanks, Carol.
We make a pretty good team, don't we?
I was just thinking the same thing.